My name is Clara Thompson, and I am 70 years old. 4 years ago, after my husband passed away, my daughter Emily invited me to move in with her family in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. At the time, I saw it as a new beginning, a chance to bridge a long-standing gap and be closer to my 2 grandchildren, Lily and Ethan. But over time, this spacious, modern house gradually turned into an invisible cage, where I was no longer a loved one but an old, forgotten item, an unwanted burden. That night at dinner, the atmosphere in the dining room was so tense and heavy that I could almost taste the bitterness in my mouth. The chandeliers shining from the ceiling, which should have brought a warm feeling, made Emily's frowning face even more obvious. At 40, she had the sharp features of a successful woman, but in those eyes there was always a smoldering anger, as if the whole world had disappointed her. Sitting opposite was Nathan Carter, my son-in-law, a famous doctor, who looked calm, but his eyes were cold and distant to the point that it made me shiver. Lily, my 15-year-old niece, was glued to the phone screen under the table, completely isolated from the surrounding space. Ethan, a quiet 12-year-old boy, with eyes as blue as a winter lake, quietly observed every little movement, his eyes filled with heart-wrenching anxiety. As for me, I sat quietly in a corner of the table, trying to shrink into myself, feeling like I was just a faint line in the family picture that I should have been an integral part of. The meal began in a stifling silence. The sound of knives and forks hitting the porcelain plates rang out rhythmically, sharp as a bell signaling something ominous. Emily kept glancing at me, her eyes like needles piercing every fiber of my being, making me want to disappear. I tried to ignore it, trying to eat quickly just to escape this gloomy atmosphere. And then the inevitable happened. Lily, still engrossed in her phone, dropped her plate on the floor. It was a small sound, but it was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Emily spun around, her voice sharp as a knife. "Lily, are you listening to me? Always on the phone. How many times have I told you? What do you want people to think of our family?" Each word was like a knife cutting through the air, cold and angry. As a grandmother, I couldn't sit still. I spoke up, my voice soft and cautious. "Emily, she's still young. Speak gently. If you scold her like that, she'll be scared." I just wanted to ease the tension, to protect my granddaughter from harsh words. But those words were like pouring fuel on an already burning fire. Emily immediately turned to me, her gaze like a lightning bolt. She stared at me, as if I had just committed an unforgivable crime. "Mom, can you stop interfering with the way I raise my children? You always think you're right. Don't you see? It's because you spoil the children like this that they turn out like this." Emily's every word was like a needle stabbing straight into my heart. I choked up, unable to say anything more. But it didn't stop there. The anger opened the door for all the resentment I had felt for so long. "You know, sometimes I feel like you're a burden. You interfere in everything, from the smallest things to the biggest things. You don't understand life anymore. You're out of date." Burden. The words echoed in my head, sharp and cruel. A pain spread through my chest, stuck in my throat. I had sacrificed, tried to fit in, helped in secret, and all I got in return was coldness, disdain, and heartrending words. I glanced at Nathan, hoping he would say something, but he only looked at me with an emotionless, empty gaze. Lily, who had just been scolded, glanced up at me, her eyes hesitant as if she wanted to say something, but then she lowered her head. Ethan remained silent, his small hands clenched in his lap, his eyes sad and sympathetic as he turned to me. At that moment, I felt like an unnoticed shadow, a wandering ghost in my own daughter's house. The feeling of pain and hurt welled up inside me, making me want to disappear from this place, a place that should have been my final refuge. The air in the dining room was still thick, but now the silence was heavier than the scolding. I felt as if all eyes were on me, not sympathetic, but cold, knowing, judgmental. Emily showed no signs of stopping. She seemed to be using this moment to vent her pent-up frustrations, as if I were the source of all her insecurities. "You know," Emily continued, her voice razor-sharp, "I'm tired of you meddling in everything. From Lily's school choices, to the way I've decorated the house, to what's for dinner tonight. You always think you're right, and everyone has to listen to you. Emily's every word was like a sharp knife cutting deep into my heart. I tried to live as tactfully and gently as I could, doing whatever I thought was best for my daughter and her family. From the moment I moved here, I told myself to do my best not to be a burden, to get along and help. I cooked, did the laundry, looked after the children whenever Emily and Nathan were away. I even learned how to use a smartphone and social media, hoping not to fall behind. But all those efforts seemed to be taken lightly, even distorted as imposition. I felt like I was standing in front of an invisible wall that I could not overcome, unable to reach the heart of the very daughter I once held in my arms. Nathan, my son-in-law, kept his face as cold as ice, never once showing his attitude from beginning to end. He was a famous doctor, respected by everyone, and that made every word he said in this family carry more weight than anyone else's. Emily turned to her husband, as if looking for support. Nathan nodded slightly, then spoke slowly, his voice even and distant, as if presenting a clinical diagnosis. "Mrs. Clara, I think Emily is not exaggerating. Your constant interference, even with good intentions, has unintentionally created psychological pressure for Emily and the children. You should try to live more independently, reduce your dependence on us. That, in my opinion, will be better for everyone." Nathan's words, though gentle, seemingly reasonable, felt like a slap in the face. He didn't scream or be mean, but each word he uttered was a cold judgment, denying everything I'd worked to build. He didn't call me a burden, but he used technical terms like psychological pressure and dependency, which made me feel like a threat in their eyes. I felt pulled down into a pit of isolation, framed as a problem to be solved, not a loving mother or grandmother. Less dependent. Be more independent. Those words were like cold nails driven into my mind, reminding me that I was living at their mercy, and that they didn't need me here. Maybe they still had some affection for me, but not enough to keep me as a real part of the family. I had become an object, a rock in the way of the peaceful path they were trying to walk. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air-conditioned room, but from the clear and uncompromising abandonment. I felt pushed aside, without a voice, without a place to stand. I looked at Ethan, my silent nephew, as if searching for a small ray of light. The boy raised his head, his eyes filled with worry and sorrow. As if unable to bear the heaviness that enveloped the meal, Ethan spoke in a small but trembling voice, "Mom. I think. Grandma." But Emily cut him off immediately. Her voice was sharp, like a hammer hitting the floor. "Ethan. Be quiet. This is none of your business." She gave Ethan a cold look, her eyes like a sword that made him flinch. Ethan lowered his head, his little hands clenched under the table, trying to hide his hurt and confusion. I felt a pang in my chest, not just from the humiliation, but from seeing my little nephew being dragged into this cold vortex. In that moment of suffocation and despair, a clear thought flashed through me like a flash of lightning in the rain. I cannot continue to live like this. I cannot continue to be patient, resigned, treated like a freeloader, like an old, forgotten soul. I did not live my life to be treated like a leftover. I am Clara Thompson, a woman who has been through war, who built a home with her own 2 hands, who has loved and sacrificed her whole life for her children and grandchildren. I do not deserve to be despised like this. I stood up slowly, each movement slow but sure, a statement without words. I didn't say a word. I looked straight at Emily, her eyes no longer wet with tears, but a calm and decisive look. She paused for a second, seemingly surprised, but her expression remained as cold as frost. I turned around, gently pulling the chair back, the sound echoing sharply in the thick air. I didn't turn around. I knew I would never return to that room again. I would leave this place. Not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to choose self-respect. The dining room behind me seemed to sink into a gloomy silence as I quietly walked out of the room, leaving behind confused looks, unspoken questions, and an emptiness that permeated the space. I walked heavily up to the 2nd floor, where the small room that had been my home for the past 4 years was located. The room was so simple that it could be called empty, only a few essential items, no paintings on the walls, no personal marks. It reflected the state of my temporary life in this house, like a long-time unwelcome guest. The moonlight outside the window filtered through the curtains, casting quiet and cold streaks of light on the floor. I did not turn on the light, letting the darkness envelop me, like a shell hiding the tears that were about to fall. I opened the old wooden cabinet door and took out the faded suitcase that I had brought with me when I left the house that used to be my home. It had been a silent witness to many trips and to the big and small events that I had experienced. Now, it would be used to contain the remaining fragments of a life that I had hoped to revive here. I began to pack my few belongings into the suitcase, a few simple clothes, a worn-out novel, a small photo frame with the smile of my late husband, and an old wooden box containing mementos that had faded over the years. Each item seemed to evoke a slice of memory, each memory piled up over the years. My hands trembled as I folded the old sweater, my mind drifting back to the first days I moved here. At that time, my husband had just passed away, the pain was still fresh like a wound that had not healed. I was just a widow, struggling in loneliness. And then Emily, my daughter, came to me, holding me in her arms like the days when I held her in my arms. "Mom, don't be sad anymore. Come live with Nathan and me, okay? We will take care of you. You won't be alone anymore." Her voice was gentle and warm, like a light shining in the darkness. I believed in the love of children, believed that it was an invitation coming from the heart. I remember the first days here, I worked hard to be a part of this family. Every morning, I woke up early to cook breakfast, clean the house, pick up the kids after school. I couldn't afford to be lazy or a burden. I wanted to prove that I was still valuable, that I could provide warmth and stability, things that every family needs. But then, gradually, those efforts became redundant in Emily's eyes. She began to resent every little thing I did, from the way I cooked to the way I helped the kids with their homework. Whatever I did, she looked at me with judgment, as if I was an outsider who had interfered with her family's rhythm. A sigh escaped my chest, heavy and weary. There was no pain deeper than being rejected by your own child, made redundant. I picked up my husband's photo frame, hugging it tightly as if clinging to the only safe place left. Tears fell silently. "Dad," I whispered, my voice choked, "what did I do wrong? Why is my child so cruel?" While I was still immersed in memories and the sting of reality, the door to the room gently opened. Ethan, my 12-year-old nephew, stepped in with cautious steps. His small face was filled with confusion and worry. He approached me, his clear eyes shining with pity. "Grandma," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling as if trying to suppress an anxiety, you're really going?" I looked at him, deep into his eyes, innocent eyes that shouldn't be witnessing such painful adult things. I felt my heart constrict. I didn't want Ethan to be sad, didn't want him to think he was abandoned in the mess adults made. I forced a gentle smile, forced but sincere. "Yeah, I'll be gone for a while, Ethan," I said softly, my voice as soft as a breeze. "I'm going to stay with my friend, Margaret, in downtown Portland. Don't worry about me. I'll call you often, tell you how things are." I stroked the boy's soft hair, trying to instill a little reassurance, a little love that I was gathering from the little I had left in my heart. Ethan nodded, his eyes still heavy. The boy seemed to want to say something more, but then hesitated, then quietly turned away, walking out of the room like a shadow, leaving me alone in the room that was engulfed in silence. When the door closed, I was faced with silence again, the heavy silence of a broken heart. The pain of being pushed out of the house by my own daughter was like a slash straight into the trust that I had once cherished. But in the midst of that pain, a quiet sobriety arose. I realized that for too long I had lived without daring to ask for anything for myself, living in resignation and humility to the point of losing my dignity. I had forgotten that I was also a human being, with feelings, with values, with the right to be loved and respected. A clear thought flashed through my mind: I couldn't go on living like this. I couldn't continue to exist as a shadow in my own family. I had to leave, not just this house, but this weak, damaged version of myself. I clutched the suitcase in my hand, which contained my past and a part of my future. In the depths of my pain, I felt a simmering power rising. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I couldn't turn back. And this time I would live for myself. I dragged the old suitcase out of the small room that had been my refuge for the past 4 years. The wheels lightly scraped against the cold wooden floor, emitting a monotonous clatter that echoed throughout the quiet hallway. Each step I took felt like I was dragging a heavy heart, not from the luggage, but from the nameless pain that was slowly bleeding in my chest. I had made up my mind, and this time, nothing would stop me. No matter where I went, no matter what I did, I could no longer exist in this house, where my own daughter had treated me like an inanimate object, a burden that no one wanted to bear. As I dragged my suitcase to the main door, the yellow light from the hallway spilled onto the floor, creating sad patches of light. A figure suddenly appeared, blocking me. It was Emily. Her face was still red with anger, her eyes were cold, sharp as a knife, and full of unspoken questions. I had thought she would try to hold on, would show a little regret, even if it was reluctant. But no. Emily stood there, her arms crossed over her chest, her posture as solid as a wall, filled with aggression and distance. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice dry, unconcerned, filled with resentment. "What good will it do if you leave in the middle of the night? You're always like this. Always making a mess of things. Do you think it's noble of you to leave?" Emily's every word was like a sharp knife cutting through my heart. I was so tired of her baseless criticism, of her treating me like a nuisance. I looked straight into her eyes, no longer afraid, no longer timid. My gaze had been tempered by years of suffering, by long nights of silently swallowing tears. No more arguing. No more letting myself fall into the vicious spiral of words. "Emily," I said, my voice low and slow, each word falling into the cold air, "I'm not leaving. I'm just on my way to finding myself." I paused, taking a deep breath, as if to gather the last of my courage. "You know, I already know." Emily's face froze. Her once impenetrable gaze turned confused, then panicked. She didn't understand what I was saying, but something was clearly bothering her. "Know what?" Emily stammered, her voice no longer steady. I kept my eyes on him, pouring all my faith into his next words. This was the moment I couldn't keep quiet any longer. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. "I know about the drug trials at Nathan's clinic. I know you guys were trying to hide the serious side effects of that drug. I saw the doctored reports. I know it all, Emily." The words were like an explosion in the silence. Emily was stunned. Her face was as pale as paper. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled slightly. The previous aggression shattered in a moment of horror. "No. Mom, what nonsense are you talking about? There's no way. You're making things up. Mom, do you think everyone has to believe you because you're old?" She tried to struggle and protest, but her voice was trembling and lifeless. I didn't waver. I held my gaze, like a mother who had finally seen through the child she once trusted. "I'm not making things up, I'm not crazy. I read it all, the altered figures, the numbers that didn't match. I kept quiet for you, for Ethan, for Lily. But I can't go on like this. This isn't just a personal mistake, it's people's lives. Those patients put their trust in you, and they have a right to know the truth." I was no longer just talking to my daughter, I was standing up for principles, for the right that I had let lie dormant for too long. Emily fell silent. In her eyes, I saw one thing clearly, the collapse of power, of blind trust, and perhaps the last respect she had for me. She had nothing left to say, just standing there, stunned, like someone who had had everything taken away. I didn't wait. I walked past Emily, dragging my suitcase toward the door. The sound of the lock clicking echoed through the silence of the house. I didn't look back. I knew that moment was the end of a chapter in my life, one filled with so much suffering, forbearance, and sacrifice that I had lost myself. But now, I had crossed that line. I chose the truth, even if it was bitter, because it was the truth that would take me to a place where my heart would no longer be troubled. The heavy wooden door closed behind me with a dry click, cutting off Emily's faint sobs. I didn't look back. Darkness had engulfed the quiet suburban Portland street, only the yellow streetlights flickering on the ground, illuminating my slow steps. The rattling of the suitcase wheels scratched the still surface of the night. A crisp late-night breeze brushed through my silver hair, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. But I didn't feel cold. Instead, a strange feeling rose in my heart, a feeling I had thought I would never experience again: freedom. I dragged my suitcase to the gate. The taxi I had called was waiting, its headlights shining like a lone eye in the darkness. But as I was about to step out, a tall shadow suddenly appeared blocking my path. Nathan. He had followed me all the way here. His usually cold face was visibly tense, his sharp eyes seemed to penetrate my thoughts. He stared at me, like a cornered wild animal. "Where are you going at this hour, Clara?" Nathan asked, his voice trying to sound concerned, but I could hear the wariness and fear underneath. "What happened? Do you need any help?" I didn't reply. I just stared at him, my eyes no longer filled with fear or helplessness. Instead, there was a cold contempt, like a knife cutting straight through the veneer of sanctimony he wore every day. I had no reason to remain silent anymore. "Nathan," I said, my voice even and sharp, each word hitting the space between us, "you think I don't know what's going on in your clinic? What did you do with those reports? You falsified them to cover up deadly side effects, did you?" Nathan's face paled instantly. The arrogant confidence, the air of a successful doctor, all vanished in an instant. He opened his mouth, but all that came out were weak, breathless denials. "Mrs. Clara, you're misunderstanding. I didn't do anything wrong," he stammered, his eyes averted, his body leaning slightly towards me, as if he was about to reach out to stop me or persuade me to go back. "Don't act rashly. Please, go home, we can talk." But his body betrayed his words. His eyes were glazed over, sweat beaded on his forehead, his fingers clenched involuntarily. I could see fear creeping under his mask of calm, fear that the truth would be revealed, that his career and reputation, all the hard work he had built, would be destroyed in an instant. Nathan might be a good doctor, but he had never learned to lie to a woman who saw through his cover-ups. I took a step back, keeping my distance. "I didn't misunderstand anything, Nathan," I said, my voice colder than the night. "And I'm not going back. You chose your path, and now it's time to take responsibility." I didn't need any more false denials. I was tired of clumsy drama. I turned and walked straight to the taxi. The driver, a middle-aged man with a wrinkled face, looked at me with confusion. He must have witnessed the entire short but tense confrontation. I opened the door and put my suitcase on the back seat. Before I got in, I glanced back at Nathan one last time. He stood motionless under the porch light, his face pale, his eyes filled with panic. There was more than fear in his gaze, there was anger, and a hint of desperation. I said nothing more. I got in the car and slammed the door. "Come on, kid," I said to the driver, my voice low and hoarse. "To the nearest motel." The car drove away, leaving Nathan and the cold house behind. 4 years of my life had been wrapped up in that place, 4 years of hope, then disappointment, of silence, then explosion. Now, as the taxi sped through the deserted streets, I looked out the window. The scenery passed by like a fast-forwarded film, each tree, each house like a memory I had just let go of. I took a deep breath. The fresh summer night air filled my lungs, and my chest felt lighter. For the first time in years, I felt a profound release, as if a stone that had been weighing down on my heart for so long had fallen into the abyss. I had lived in silence for too long, buried in resignation for too long. But not now. When I chose the truth, when I dared to speak after so many years of silence, I felt like a bird breaking through the bars of its cage. I have crossed the line. I am no longer the weak Clara, no longer the patient mother. I am Clara Thompson, the woman who dares to look the truth in the face, dares to walk when no one is by her side, dares to live true to her own conscience. No matter how stormy the future is, whether loneliness or challenges lie ahead, I know I have regained the most precious thing I have ever lost: freedom. The taxi took me to a small motel near the city center. The sign was dim under the streetlights, the old facade seemed to have witnessed many stories of life drifting by. I walked in, got the key, and quietly went up to my room. The room was simple, the yellow light casting a layer of fake warmth on the walls, a warmth that was only superficial, unable to reach the deepest part of my heart. I put my suitcase on the floor. The clack sound echoed dryly, concisely, like an echo of what I had just left behind. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My body was exhausted, as if I had just weathered a storm I had not prepared for. Just a few hours ago, I had been in that house, still my mother, still my grandmother, still the woman who had tried to hold together a broken family. And now, I was just a shadow, alone in an unfamiliar room, sitting and picking up the pieces of my shattered memories. I looked around. There was no old wooden chair where I used to sit and knit every night. There was no laughter from Lily and Ethan coming from the next room. There was no smell of the apple pie I used to prepare every weekend. There was just silence. And me. The pain of being kicked out of the house by my own daughter was still raw, stinging like a cut that had not yet had time to clot. Emily's insults, sharp as a knife, cold as ice, kept echoing. Nathan's icy eyes, the way he stood blocking the way like a prison guard, all of them appeared frame by frame in my head, like a slow-motion movie with no pause button. I had lived for them, had sacrificed too much. Yet, when the truth was touched, I became the one being chased away, the destroyer, the enemy of happiness. And then, the secret. The secret I'd been carrying around for 2 years. I remember that fateful day clearly, when Nathan asked me to sort through his old files at the clinic. He said he was too busy, and that I was the only one he trusted. I was glad of it, naively. While cleaning, I came across a strange file, clinical trial reports for a new drug. I had intended to tidy it up, but a few numbers caught my eye, clumsily edited numbers, blurred passages of text that looked like they had something to hide. As someone who had been an accountant for over 30 years, I was not one to be fooled. I began to read more, and then the truth came out, cold and cruel. The drug had serious side effects. Several deaths had been reported in the trials. But instead of being reported honestly, every trace of danger had been edited out, hidden behind positive language and distorted charts. Nathan had deliberately falsified, for what reason, I don't know. Fame? Money? Ambition? None of that justified putting patients at risk. For the past 2 years, I have been torn. I wanted to speak, but I was afraid. I was afraid that if I spoke, Emily would collapse. I was afraid that my young grandchildren would lose their father. I tried to convince myself that silence was the least painful way. I tried to warn Emily, with hints, with looks, with half-sentences. But she always brushed me off, thinking that I was suspicious, that I was old and negative. I lied to myself, that silence was an act of kindness. But now, as I was pushed aside as an unwanted person, I realized that silence was the first betrayal I had ever committed against myself. The phone rang, pulling me back to reality. I jumped. A message appeared on the screen, from Emily. I opened it. Each word that appeared was like a knife stabbing straight into my bleeding heart. "Are you satisfied, Mom? You ruined everything. You're selfish. Don't ever call me again. Don't even think about seeing the kids again." I put the phone down on the bed, my hands shaking. Even though I had expected it, even though I had told myself to be strong, nothing could have prepared me for the wound my own daughter had caused. I closed my eyes, tears silently flowing, salty and bitter. And then, the phone vibrated again. This time it was a call. I looked at the screen, and a small light flashed in the darkness. It was Ethan. I picked up the phone immediately. "Grandma." The boy's voice rang out, trembling, mixed with worry. "Grandma, are you okay? Where are you? I heard from Mom, you left?" My heart clenched. Ethan's voice, that young, warm voice, was the last straw that pulled me back from the abyss. I swallowed my tears and tried to speak softly. "I'm okay, Ethan. I'm in a safe place, not far away. Don't worry. I love you, and Lily. So much." Even though it was only a few minutes, that call was like a hug. Gentle. Silent. But enough to warm the cold inside me. When I hung up, I sat there for a long moment. Then I reached for my phone. I needed someone. Not Emily. Not Nathan. I needed a friend, someone who really understood me. I reached for the familiar name in my contacts, Margaret. We were inseparable friends in college, two different people bound by an unconditional friendship. Margaret was strong, rational, and never judged me. I pressed the call button. The ringing continued, and then a familiar voice rang out. "Clara? Is that you?" Margaret's voice, warm as a spring breeze in the middle of winter. "I was so worried about you. Emily called and said you had left. Where are you? What happened?" I burst into tears. And then, like a flood of pent-up tears, I poured them all out: the fateful night, Emily's insults, my decision to leave, and finally, the secret about Nathan. My voice shook, each word tearing at my chest, but I didn't stop. I needed to say it. I needed someone to believe me. Margaret listened quietly, not interrupting. When I stopped, there was only a sigh on the other end of the line, long and heartbreaking. Then she said, slowly but firmly, "Clara, you did the right thing. Yes, and bravely. You can't go on like this. And about that secret. I know how long it's been tormenting you. It's enough now. Come live with me. I'll always have a place for you. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. Get some rest. It'll be all right." I put down the phone, feeling a little lighter. In the darkness, I was no longer completely alone. There was still a home waiting for me, not made of bricks and stones, but of friendship, understanding, and something I thought I had lost long ago: trust. The next morning, as promised, Margaret appeared. She entered the motel with a gentle smile and warm arms, as if carrying the warmth of years of friendship. The cold of the long night, the loneliness of a soul that had just left the place called family, suddenly disappeared in part under that tolerant presence. Margaret's house, located in the center of Portland, was the complete opposite of the cold, distant atmosphere of Emily's house. From the outside, it radiated an inviting look with blooming flower pots hanging on the balcony and lush green window frames that seemed to breathe life. Stepping inside, I was immediately enveloped by a heartbreakingly familiar space: the warmth from the old fireplace, the smell of roasted coffee mixed with the smell of old books, creating a sense of peace that seemed to have been lost for a long time. The paintings on the walls, the bookshelves overflowing with knowledge, and the soft cotton-covered armchairs seemed to embrace a lost soul. Margaret did not rush to ask questions. She understood that I needed a moment to listen to myself. She quietly made me a cup of hot herbal tea, placed a thick blanket in my arms, and told me to rest. After a shower and a change of clean clothes, I felt revived, if only a little. I sat quietly in an armchair by the window, looking out at the street where people hurried by as if none of them knew the pain I was suffering. That afternoon, when her mood had calmed somewhat, Margaret sat down across from me. She didn't press me to speak, just looked at me with understanding eyes. "Clara, you did a very brave thing by leaving that place," she began, her voice soft but filled with simmering determination. "No one, not even your daughter, has the right to hurt you like that. And the secret about Nathan, you can't hold on to it like a wound that will never stop bleeding." We began a deep conversation about the options ahead. I poured out my mounting emotions: pain, resentment, doubt, and vague fears about the future. I told Margaret every detail: how I had discovered the forged documents, the nightly struggle of whether to speak or remain silent, the fear of what might happen if the truth came to light, With her natural intelligence and candor, Margaret helped me see things clearly. She not only listened, she also opened a path for me. "Clara, I know you love Emily and the kids. But you have to think about the patients out there, the innocent people who Nathan is deceiving. Falsifying medical data is not just fraud, it's a crime. If that drug is approved based on false information, it could mean hundreds, thousands of lives. Can you bear that?" Her words were like a blast of cold water, chilling, but sobering. Margaret did not stop there. She continued, firmly, "If you remain silent, you will never find true peace. Your conscience will not forgive. And Clara, protecting the children does not mean covering up their parents' wrongdoings. On the contrary, exposing the truth may be the only way to save them from the shadow of guilt Nathan has cast." I was silent. My heart was heavy with the image of Ethan and Lily. I was afraid that they would be hurt, that they would blame me. They were too young to understand that sometimes, love is not silence, but the courage to stand up for what is right. I was also afraid that I would not be strong enough to bear the legal and social troubles that might come. I was old, would I still have the strength to fight? As if she could see through the turmoil in my heart, Margaret gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "I know this isn't an easy decision," she whispered. "But Clara, you've been a person who's lived your whole life for what's right. And now you have a chance, not just to right a wrong, but to save a life. I'll be here, by your side." Those words penetrated me like the first rays of the morning sun, warming a cold heart. I silently looked back at everything, 2 long years of torment, sleepless nights of fear, the loneliness of having to silently watch evil exist right in my own home. I had lost Emily, lost the house that I once thought was my home. So what else did I have to lose? I took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. A sense of relief began to spread through my chest. I knew, silence was no longer an option. The truth had to be told, not just to protect my conscience, but to save others from tragedy. I could not carry this burden on my shoulders another day. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would do the right thing. I would expose Nathan, not for revenge, but for justice. Because I, finally, had found my voice again. The decision was made, and a new energy seemed to burst forth within me, coursing through my veins. Hesitation, doubt, and fear were gradually erased, giving way to a clear, steadfast will. I was no longer alone in this journey. Margaret, my lifelong friend, was not only a gentle refuge but also a sharp, courageous ally. That evening, under the soft yellow light of the warm living room, we began to outline a specific plan of action, step by step, as if preparing for a decisive battle. Margaret took the lead. She took out a notebook and pen, set them on the table, and opened them to the first page. "The first thing, Clara, is to determine what we have," she said, her eyes shining with alertness. "What documents do you have? What specific evidence?" I stood up, went into my room, and opened the old suitcase that I had not yet unpacked. After a few minutes of rummaging, I pulled out an envelope that had yellowed with age. Inside were copies of drug test reports, edited versions that I had secretly kept for the past 2 years. I had taken pictures of them with my old phone, printed them out, and hidden them away. Back then, it was just a hunch that something was terribly wrong, and now those documents were the key. I spread the papers out on the table. Margaret, wearing glasses, sat quietly, scanning each page with the attention of a lawyer. She pointed out the erased numbers, the unusual footnotes, and the blank spaces in the data, signs of obvious manipulation. "Good, Clara. Not much, but enough to raise suspicion and make them investigate. Especially if we can show the side effects that were suppressed." We began to discuss our next steps. "Go to the right place," Margaret said, making notes. "No random accusations. The Oregon Medical Board is the highest authority in medical matters. That would be the place to start." From there, Margaret began to network. She called a lawyer friend and asked about the formal reporting process, the legal risks, and whistleblower protections. Next, she contacted a veteran investigative reporter who had written a series of stories exposing healthcare scandals. Margaret believed that the media would exert such pressure that it would be impossible to sweep the matter under the rug. While Margaret was busy, I sat staring at the reports on my desk. A nagging worry welled up. I imagined the consequences. Nathan's reputation would be ruined, Emily would surely be swept away, and most of all Ethan and Lily. They would have to endure the scrutiny of society, the disintegration of their families, the scars that would never heal. I shuddered at the thought. Was I causing unnecessary harm to my grandchildren? But then, the images of innocent patients appeared again, people who had placed their trust in a doctor without knowing the bitter truth behind it. If I remained silent, they would be the ones to suffer. They could lose their health, even their lives. My conscience screamed. I could not turn away. I could not let a crime continue because of personal feelings. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the fear. My eyes met Margaret's, still sitting there, serious, diligently taking notes. She was the one who had given me the courage I thought I had lost. I may have lost my connection with my daughter, but I couldn't lose myself. I couldn't let myself be bound by fear and guilt. Margaret, I said, my voice firmer than ever, I'm ready. We're going to do this. Margaret raised her head, her eyes shining with confidence and pride. That's great, Clara. I know you can do it. We'll do this, together. We continued to plan, breaking it down into steps, calculating it carefully. Margaret explained how to prepare the case, how to make the evidence as convincing as possible, how to protect myself from counterattacks. We also discussed how Nathan and Emily would react, the possibility of them denying it, attacking my reputation, even using lawyers to silence me. I know the road ahead will be rough, even cruel. But I have no choice. I will face it, not for revenge, but for the truth, for the lives at stake. And most of all, for myself, so that I can look in the mirror without shame. That is the only way to find peace. The meeting with the Oregon Board of Health took place on a quiet spring morning, when the air was still slightly chilly and the early morning sunlight streamed softly through the large glass windows in the board president's office. The rays of light illuminated my face, tense, anxious, and highlighted the determination in Margaret's eyes. The man across from us was an elderly chairman, his appearance serious but his gaze full of listening intent. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was the moment when everything would change. I began to tell my story, my voice still shaky, but my words clear and coherent. I recounted the time I moved in with Emily and Nathan, and the moment I stumbled upon the tampered trial reports at Nathan's clinic. I laid out the evidence, the copies I had secretly backed up, the numbers that had been altered, the data that had been erased or hidden. I explained in detail the serious side effects of the experimental drug, the dangers that Nathan had deliberately ignored for his own benefit. The chairman listened attentively, nodding occasionally and taking notes. He asked pointed, direct questions, without a word of fluff. I tried to answer honestly and clearly, not letting my emotions cloud the facts. I emphasized, this was not simply a paper trail, this was a danger that could take the health and lives of innocent people. As I said what I had been holding in all this time, an invisible burden seemed to be lifted from my shoulders. At the end of the meeting, the chairman reassured me with a firm commitment, the board would launch a thorough and prompt investigation. He assured me that the truth would be revealed, and that the vulnerable would be protected. I left the meeting with a heavy heart but also a glimmer of hope. Even though I knew it was just the beginning, I felt like I had crossed an important threshold. Surprisingly, the investigation process happened faster than I expected. With a series of clear evidence and the decisive involvement of the board, Nathan Carter was quickly investigated and arrested on charges of medical fraud. The news spread like wildfire. Newspapers large and small in Portland, especially the newspaper that Margaret had skillfully approached, simultaneously reported the shocking news. The headline was sensational: reputable doctor accused of falsifying test reports, the truth behind the perfect appearance. The articles delved into the details, exposing every wrongdoing that Nathan had tried to hide. Nathan's clinic was shut down immediately. The aura he had built up over the years was shattered. Patients were confused and angry. The medical community was shaken. I followed every news story, every image, including the moment Nathan was handcuffed and escorted out of the clinic, and I was overcome with a sense of confusion. I felt no joy of victory, nor even satisfaction. There was only a deep weariness and a sadness that was hard to name. Justice had been served, but the price was extremely bitter. I constantly worried about Ethan and Lily, two innocent children who were about to face the world's scrutiny when their father became a criminal. I wondered, how much would their young hearts be damaged? Would they still have any faith in adults? I also thought of Emily, the girl I once held in my heart, the girl I once hoped to reconnect with. Now that the truth has been revealed, will she be able to forgive me? Or is the distance between us now an unbridgeable chasm? I sat alone in Margaret's old armchair, staring out the window. Portland was beautiful as ever, with its tree-lined streets and fresh spring air. But my world, my own small, hopeful world, had been turned upside down. I knew I had done the right thing. I had no regrets. But that rightness was not a sweet victory, it was a deep cut, a pain I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I just hoped that somehow Ethan and Lily would grow up strong enough to survive it all, and understand that sometimes the truth needs to be told, even if it means losing everything. Nathan's scandal quickly became the center of public opinion, spreading at a dizzying speed. Just a few days after the news broke, my phone rang. I looked at the screen, it was Emily. A heavy feeling rose in my heart, like a stone pressing down on my chest. I knew this call would not be easy, but I had prepared myself for this moment for a long time. I pressed the answer button. Immediately, an angry shout came from the other end of the line, not giving me time to say anything. Are you satisfied now? What have you done? You have destroyed my family. You are selfish and a traitor. You have put my husband in jail. Emily's voice broke, shrill, mixed with anger and suffocating hurt. Each word was like a sharp knife, stabbing straight into my heart. She kept screaming, blaming me for everything, as if I was the one who had brought her entire life down. Her sobs, her cries mixed with harsh words made me feel like my whole world was collapsing. I knew she was in pain, but the anger she poured out on me made me numb. Emily, calm down, I said, my voice hoarse and shaking. I never meant to hurt you or the kids. I did this for the patients, for the truth. What Nathan did was wrong, unacceptably wrong. Do you know how many people could be in danger because of those falsified reports? But Emily didn't listen, or rather, didn't want to listen. She cut me off, tearing apart any attempt at explanation. Justice? That's your justice, destroying my family, making me lose my husband, my children lose their father? Do you know how they'll live, with everyone talking and sneering? Her voice trailed off, then rose again in desperation. Don't ever call me again. You don't have the right to see the children again. I forbid you. You've lost the children, you traitor. The cold beep, beep, sound rang out as it hung up. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, tears slowly streaming down my cheeks. Emily's words were like the final stab of a knife, completely cutting off the last fragile bond between mother and daughter. I knew this moment would come, but when it actually happened, the pain was beyond anything I could have imagined. The room fell silent. I felt a huge void inside me. I had lost my daughter, not to death, but to misunderstanding, to irreconcilable values. A relationship that had once been filled with love was now reduced to ashes. The phone vibrated again. A message. I opened the screen, it was Lily. Grandma. How did this happen? Dad got arrested. Mom cried a lot. Everyone at school is talking about it. I don't know what to do. I read each word, my heart clenched. Her innocent tone contained confusion, bewilderment, and even a hint of reproach. Lily was too young to understand, only that the world around her was turning upside down, and adults were no longer a safe place. I wanted to hold her, to comfort her, to explain, but I couldn't. I couldn't be there for her right now. With shaking hands, I texted back. My dear Lily, don't worry too much. I love you and Ethan. Everything will be okay. Try to be strong. No matter what happens, I'm always here, always watching over you. I don't know if Lily understood what I wrote. But I need her to know that my love has never changed. Then the phone rang again, this time it was Ethan. His voice was low and shaky, but clearly filled with concern and hurt. Grandma, why did you do that? Why didn't you tell me? My mom said you ruined our family. My chest tightened. Emily had started to fill the kids' heads with terrible things about me. Ethan, I said softly, trying to keep my voice even, I know you're confused. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But I did what was right. I couldn't stay silent when the truth was being twisted. I don't hate your father. I just want to protect those who are hurting. I chose my words so that a child could understand. You know, sometimes doing the right thing makes people angry, even hateful. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to live in peace. I still love your parents, and most of all, I love you and Lily with all my heart. I hope that one day, you will understand. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then his voice became soft, like a whisper of the wind. I don't know. My mother said, she can't see us anymore. Ethan, I said, trying to keep my voice patient, no matter what your mother says, she loves you and Lily. She will always be here, waiting for you. Keep in touch with her when you can, honey. I know Emily will do everything she can to keep me from my grandchildren, to erase my presence from their lives. But I will not give up. Ethan and Lily are all I have left in this world. I will not let go. Even if I am pushed out, even if I am forbidden, I will still find a way to let them know that their grandmother still loves them, always watches over their every step. This fight, more than justice, is a fight for love. 3 months have passed since the scandal broke. Although life is slowly returning to normal, the scars it left behind are still as clear as ink. I still live with Margaret in her cozy home, a haven from the storm. We have been through some rough times together, from the mornings spent anxiously following the headlines in the newspapers to the nights I have spent unable to sleep worrying about the future of my grandchildren. Nathan Carter's story eventually faded from the headlines and news. He faced the consequences. He was convicted of medical fraud and sentenced to probation, fined a large sum, and had his medical license revoked for several years. He avoided jail, but his once glorious career was irretrievably ruined. Nathan Carter's name is now synonymous with abuse of power and failure. Emily was not spared. Her husband's practice was forced to close, and Emily herself, as manager, lost her job. My once proud and confident daughter was now in crisis. Although I no longer had direct contact with Emily, I knew from the scattered accounts of Margaret's relationship that she was struggling financially and emotionally. She was said to have sold some of her assets to pay off debts and stay afloat. That afternoon, I sat in the living room, looking out the window. Summer had come to Portland, the sun was shining brightly on the garden, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy. There was no sense of glee at seeing Emily and Nathan in such dire straits. Instead, a deep sadness lingered. Even though they had hurt me, Emily was still my daughter, and Nathan was the father of my 2 grandchildren. I had never wished anything bad on them. All I had wanted was justice, and it had been done. What worries me most right now is not them, but the future of Ethan and Lily. Those children are caught in the cruel vortex created by adults, facing an unstable reality, lacking both material and spiritual things. They are too young to understand, but I know the damage is gradually forming in their souls. With Margaret's support, I decided to set up an education fund for Ethan and Lily. It wasn't a lot of money, just what I had saved from my own savings and my husband's estate. I had originally planned to use the money for my retirement. But now I understand that investing in their future is the most worthwhile thing I can do. Margaret helped me learn about education trusts and assisted me in completing all the legal paperwork. The fund will ensure that the 2 children have enough money to study, from tuition, books, to extracurricular activities, so that they can still develop comprehensively and excel, regardless of their current circumstances. Life with Margaret gradually became stable. She was a great friend. Not only did she provide a roof over my head, but she was also a strong moral support. We cooked together, read books, and shared stories, big and small. Margaret always encouraged me to live positively, and she encouraged me to participate in community activities. I started volunteering at a senior center, where I helped lonely elderly people and families in need. Being able to contribute in a small way to other people's lives made me feel useful again, and brought me a peace that I had long lost. I also started taking care of my health more, taking walks in the park near my house, breathing in the fresh air, looking at the colorful flowers and listening to the birds singing every morning. Those moments brought me deep relaxation, helping my soul gradually recover from the severe trauma. However, the pain of losing my relationship with Emily is still a wound that has not healed. I often sit quietly looking at old photos of Lily and Ethan, remembering every hug, every laugh of children. I miss Emily, the little girl who used to cling to me, whispering innocent dreams in my ear. Now, all that remains is a memory. The mother-child bond has been severed by anger and hatred. Emily does not call, does not text, and I cannot take the initiative to contact her. Ethan and Lily are the only small rays of light I still have. I still text them quietly. Lily rarely replies, maybe because her mother is too controlling or she doesn't know how to deal with it. But Ethan is different. He still texts me, telling me about school, about his lessons, about soccer games with his friends. Those short messages are my spiritual support, a small bridge connecting me to what's left of my family. I know that Emily is doing everything she can to keep me from getting close to them, but I won't back down. I will wait until Ethan and Lily are old enough to understand, mature enough to make their own choices. I have found relative peace, but that peace is still tinged with nostalgia and loss. I know that there are still difficult roads ahead, and unforeseen challenges. But I believe that, with perseverance and unconditional love, one day, all wounds will heal. And I will be able to hold my grandchildren in my arms again, feeling the warmth that I have longed for so long. Time passed quietly, bringing with it the wounds that gradually healed, but also constantly testing my endurance. I continued to live a simple life with Margaret, still participating in volunteer activities at the community center, but deep inside, the desire to be close to the children never subsided. The secret text messages back and forth with Ethan became a fragile thread that kept me attached to a part of the family, while Lily remained silent like a distant shadow. One quiet afternoon, as I was reading in Margaret's cozy living room, the doorbell rang, startling me. Margaret and I looked at each other, confused. We had not made an appointment. When Margaret opened the door, I was stunned. Standing in the doorway was Emily. It looked much more haggard than the last image I had. Its face was gaunt, its eyes were heavy with dark circles, and the confidence that had once surrounded it seemed to have been completely eroded, replaced by fatigue, despair, and an indescribable sadness. Emily stood still, saying nothing, just looking at me with a look that was a mixture of conflict and helplessness. Margaret glanced at me and gently invited Emily in. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked in and sat down on the chair opposite me. The air in the room was thick, as if a strong breath could shatter it. Only the ticking of the wall clock echoed quietly. Finally, Emily spoke. Her voice was hoarse and broken. "Mom. I have something to tell you." I kept silent, my heart sinking. I had braced myself for any reproach or sarcasm. But Emily's words took me by surprise. "Ethan, he wants to come live with his mother." I paused. A wave of emotion surged through me, surprise, anxiety, mixed with indescribable joy. Emily continued, as if struggling with herself, each word heavy. "He doesn't listen to me anymore. He avoids me, won't stay home. He keeps saying he wants to go live with me. I don't know what to do. I've lost control." He looked at me, his eyes no longer challenging but pleading desperately. "Mom, please, convince Ethan to stay. I can't let him leave. My family is already broken, I can't lose him too." I watched silently as my daughter, the one who had once pushed me out of her life, sat before me, broken. Despite what Emily had done, I still felt a pang in my heart. I understood the pain of a mother who felt her child want to leave her. But I also understood Ethan. He had lived through unnecessary trauma. I took a deep breath, and spoke softly, though my heart was still heavy. "Emily. I know you're desperate. But Ethan needs to breathe, to have his own voice. He's been through too much. I think, we shouldn't force him. Let him choose." Emily bowed her head, her shoulders shaking slightly. I could tell she was torn between love and fear of loss. After a moment of silence, I offered an opening. "How about this, Emily? Ethan can come stay with me on weekends. On special occasions, like holidays, summers, he can come here. He'll have his own space, and you can still be close to him. It'll be good for both of you." Emily raised her head, her eyes filled with confusion and concern. I could see the conflict and hurt in her eyes. But then, as if there was no other way, she nodded slightly, her voice almost a whisper. "Okay, this weekend." A small light lit up inside me, gentle yet intense. I hope that one day, Lily will understand. I have never stopped loving her. I looked at my daughter passionately. Emily did not answer, but her gaze was less cold. Something in her heart seemed to soften, even if it was just a little. The atmosphere in the room was still tense, and Emily and I were far from healed. But I knew that the door to the children was opening, especially for Ethan. This weekend, he would come to live with me. It was a small step, but it meant a lot to me. I believed that with enough patience and love, Lily would come back. Even though I have sacrificed so much, including the motherly love for my own daughter, if it brings a glimmer of hope to my grandchildren, then I am willing to continue waiting. Waiting for the day I can hold them in my arms, once again. The days that followed took on a completely different tone. Margaret's house was now not just a shelter, but a real home, where Ethan's clear laughter echoed every weekend, dispelling any remaining sadness. Ethan came to stay with me regularly, and I felt like I was reliving the peaceful years I thought I had lost long ago. We cooked, read, played chess, and talked endlessly about everything under the sun. He loved it when I told him about Emily's childhood, about the sweet memories of a once complete family. Gradually, Ethan opened up more, began to share his innermost thoughts, his hurts and confusion about his parents' broken marriage. I listened, without interrupting, without judging, just silently being there for him, letting him feel the peace, love, and unconditional acceptance he craved. Lily still kept her distance. She rarely initiated contact, but through Ethan's vague words, I knew that Lily was still silently following me. I was not impatient. I believed that, with sincere love and time, she would eventually understand and come back. I patiently sent my love through each small gift, each indirect message through Ethan, like wordless letters flying towards her closed heart. One afternoon, I sat in Margaret's small, sunny garden, holding a steaming cup of tea, watching the flowers swaying in the wind. I reflected on the journey I had taken. From a widow in her 70s, who was considered a burden and chased out of the house by her own daughter, I had risen up, faced the dark corners of my family, and most importantly, found myself again. Now, my life is no longer covered by fear or torment. I dared to step into the light, to speak the truth, and that brought me a deep peace that I had not known for many years. Even though I lost my closeness to Emily, I have no regrets. I understand that there are things that cannot be ignored, mistakes that cannot be covered up. I cannot live in a world of lies just to maintain a superficial relationship. Emily may never forgive me, and I accept that with equanimity. I did the right thing, and my conscience is at peace. I have learned that sometimes choosing to do the right thing means accepting loss, but it is a sacrifice worth making to maintain dignity and faith. My friendship with Margaret was the greatest gift life gave me in my final years. She was not just a friend, but a confidant, a sister who held my hand when I was down, who gave me strength and hope when I thought I had lost everything. Thanks to Margaret, I no longer feel alone on this journey. We grew old together, but did not fade away, but together we continued to write a gentle, profound, and shared chapter of our lives. With Ethan ready to move in every weekend, and a glimmer of hope from Lily still burning within me, I looked to the future with a whole new perspective. Life might not be perfect, but I had found the freedom to be myself, to live a life of meaning and courage. I was no longer the resigned, frail old woman I had been thought to be. I was Clara Thompson, an independent, strong, courageous woman. I had found my voice again, and I would never be silent again. The lessons of courage and the power of truth were deeply engraved in my heart. I realized that, although the path of honesty may be thorny, the greatest reward is peace of mind and a life not hidden in the dark. I may have lost a part of my family, but I found myself again. And that, to me, was completely worth the trade-off. Thank you for listening to my story.